I think it's a really interesting time for design education. Things are changing really, really rapidly. We're in a connected world, and all these things are converging. Everything's coming together, and we have to be prepared to teach students to work in this really rapidly changing economic environment.
On this episode of the Designed Podcast, our 8th and last episode of the Prologue series, we speak with Robin Landa. Robin is a distinguished professor in the Michael Graves College at Kean University. She has written 23 books, including Nimble, Thinking Creatively in the Digital Age, Graphic Design Solutions, Advertising by Design, Build Your Own Brand, Draw, and Designing Brand Experiences. Robin has won numerous awards, including awards from the National Society of Arts and Letters, the National League of Penn Women, Creativity, and the ADCNJ, and the Human Rights Educator Award. The Carnegie Foundation counts her among the great teachers of our time. Robin was the sole judge of the 2014 How Design Logo competition, and recently, Robin gave a presentation on personal branding in the Strategic Communications graduate program at Columbia University. She is the Chair of Design Incubation, which is an advocacy organization dedicated to communication design research. Check out Robin's monthly articles online at How Design. As creative director of her own firm, Robin works closely with marketing executives and their companies and organizations to develop brand strategies as well as enhance corporate creativity through seminars. If you want to reach out to Robin to discuss design, Westworld, or even life, you can find Robin on Twitter at rlanda or email her at rlanda@kean.edu. Robin, I'm so happy and excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Oh, I'm really excited. Thank you for inviting me, Pete.
Of course. Yeah, I'm keeping down my fanboy moment, but we'll share that later. That excitement later. Hey, for context, can you just briefly talk a little bit about how you got into design education and that path for you?
Sure. Well, I have a kind of complicated background. I have degrees in fine arts, in art history, and in design. And I entered the design profession through the illustration door, which I think happens for a lot of people. And when I was in graduate school, I got a teaching fellowship to help pay for the costs. And as soon as I started teaching, I fell in love with it. The first course I ever taught was a Bauhaus course in color theory. And that was just great. And I still love teaching. So I'm really excited about this topic of this podcast because you're talking to me about one of my favorite things in the whole world.
Oh, that's fabulous. So have you always been at Kean University? Is that kind of where you started?
No, I started teaching in the graduate program, but I taught in different city universities originally as an adjunct. And then my first full-time teaching job was at a 2-year private school, which is now owned by Iona College in New York, and then I went to Kean. But I also taught at NYU. I taught at School of Visual Arts, all adjunct positions until the full-time position.
Oh wow, that's quite a trip. But I think that's kind of the traditional trajectory. You know, everyone kind of has that moment where they're like, "Wow, this is really fun. This is so enjoyable." And next thing you know, they're like, "Well, how do I find more of this? How do I get involved more?" And next thing you know, you're like, well, you know, it's going to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you move around, and you find your place. But
yeah, and I think it's important for me, adjuncting was important because I got to see what it's like in different institutions.
Right. Yeah, I think that was the most valuable thing for me as well. You know, getting that flavor between. I adjuncted RIT, then I adjuncted with one of the SUNY colleges out in Buffalo. Then I lectured.
So you like the cold? Huh?
No, not anymore. Yeah, I was born and raised a Northeasterner, but now that my life path has taken me to the South, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I don't seem to mind the lack of snow. So I'm
envious. I would like to get rid of the snow.
Well, if I could share it, I would.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you're always welcome to come down and enjoy the sun. However,
Thank you.
though, it's mid-August and it's warm. Our heat index today is like 110, so
Oh, okay.
it's warm. It's warm. But yeah, so it's an amazing career, and I'm so glad that I've chosen it. And it's one of those things where why did it take so long for me to kind of find that? But I do appreciate having it. So I've had a few conversations now already with many educators, and we're talking about design education. And the current state of design education, I think, is important to have that conversation even before I start getting involved in more and more episodes. So as you may know, and as our listeners see, this is the prologue episodes of the state of design education, because I don't think that we can start having that conversation about being design educators, what our path is, what our research is, what our creative activity or endeavors might be, without really kind of setting this pre-thought of where we are with design education. So what's your point of view on that? What do you think is the state of design education?
Well, what's that curse? May you live in an interesting time. I think it's a really interesting time for design education. There used to be this saying from ancient Greek times that life is short and art is long. Well, now life is long and art and design are short. Things are changing really, really rapidly. We're in a creative economy, a global economy, a 24/7 online world, a connected world, and all these things are converging. Digital, physical realms, everything's coming together, and we have to be prepared to teach students to work in this really rapidly changing economic environment.
Yeah. So what might be some of those? Well, there's so much change. Like you said, what's kind of that world that we live in. How much change do you think that you've seen in the time that you've started doing design education until now? My question meaning, do you think we're rapidly increasing in that? Do you think it was slow, perhaps in the beginning of design education?
I think it was really slow, and I think some people are still slow to address what needs to be addressed for students to get entry-level jobs and to thrive, to become lifelong learners. People are worried about technology and then maybe emphasizing technology too much and maybe cutting out the liberal arts when I think they shouldn't. So it's a really delicate balance. And, we have this a proliferation of art and design schools, and some students are choosing that path where the liberal arts are minimal, as opposed to studying design or art in a liberal arts university setting, which I think is a great way to study design. And maybe I'm prejudiced because that's where I work. But I do think it really is a very, very different time that I'm teaching in now. And I have completely changed how I teach.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Except for the fact that I still respect my students. And still adore them and treat them with dignity and respect. So that's the constant. But everything else I have really changed in order to address their needs.
And I think that's the one thing that I'm trying to stay in tune to currently is some of the skills they might need upon graduation, and what the jobs are asking for them. So whether it's an in-house job, whether it's working for some company where they have a small design team working for them, whether it's an agency, marketing, a hospital, I just see the demands for these young designers. And I'm not talking just print and digital, but I see the demands changing so much. And it's not just the change from print to digital, but they're taking on so many roles, including some of that analysis of their audience or analysis of how their social media followers are acting with the company, how their influencers are acting. So there's so many other things. I mean, even screen-based design. So whether it's something digital or a small video clip for Instagram or whatever it might be, yet designers aren't just creating a print brochure anymore. It seems to be pretty... I explain it as kind of this thin line where design goes across and then there's all these little moments. It's like, well, what are we going to do today? And it's just amazing the amount of work that they'll work on. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. And I think that a lot of companies, especially in-house ones or smaller ones, expect that this young person coming out of a college program is going to know everything about social media and is going to be their brand strategy person and their social media strategist. And just because of the youth factor, they expect them to know so much more than they may be able to do. And as you said, I think that there's cutting costs in terms of hiring strategists or planners or media people, and the designer has this all-encompassing job, which has many tentacles. It's just it can be overwhelming for a young person, especially when it's a small agency or an in-house place where there aren't too many senior designers.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you think, or perhaps, where have you changed in your curriculum, in your teaching? We still have traditional like graphic design 1, graphic design 2, graphic design 3. And my colleague and I have talked about it, and it's not so much suited any longer for our needs. So, we're in that discussion of, okay, let's look at this, let's talk about this and change even the titles of classes, but even to the fact of what stays and what goes. I've been having a lot of conversations with my podcast guests lately of even Thomas Jonkin in the last podcast, where he was talking about that's a huge problem, because what do you take away? And when you start thinning it out and you're just becoming a jack of all trades but a master of none kind of thing, and it's complicated.
Yeah, and I don't know if other BFA programs are going through this, but the state of New Jersey just asked us to cut our program to 120 credits. So we had to lob off 11 credits, and it's like, what do you cut? Plus, we're NASET accredited, so you have to have X number of art histories, X number of design theory, and then we're a liberal arts university, so we're a school of design housed in a liberal arts university, so there's all the liberal arts credits. Yeah, so it's really hard. But what I've done is I no longer teach a book cover, a poster. I teach integrated thinking across media. So when they're solving a problem, they're thinking about it as a system or a program or a campaign, whatever word you want to use. But they're thinking it as a 360, developing a 360 strategy that many ideas are part of, and how they live individually across media platforms, and how each media platform can be used richly. And so the students end up with 360 integrated campaigns out of my class.
Now, do you find that possible in both your entry-level design classes as well as the upper-level design classes?
It's much easier, obviously, in upper level, because I teach upper level, so they're coming to me, and other people have to worry about preparing them for getting to me. But I do encourage the entry-level teachers to think that way, to prepare them with the notion that you're not just solving one problem. It's a problem that's part of a system. And how does that fit into the system? And how does that fit into the marketing plan? And how does that fit into the world? So we're really trying to get them to see a broader, an expanse of how each design problem fits into a program.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult. And I agree. I've created my courses where I write the student learning outcomes first. and that what I want to come out of that course, and then I create the content for the course to facilitate the outcomes.
Right. And then the projects are basically based on, getting in the certain criteria kind of across the different project components, if you will. So you're facing the big concept of that systems approach and across the different medias, and then bringing it down through to, well, here's the deliverable. But it's more so of understanding, applying design skills at this larger level.
Right, larger level. And I do something that's kind of different. I've written about this. I teach students to work backward. So a lot of the times in my classes, we create content, entertainment content, information content, and then I have them analyze it, deconstruct it, and figure out what they can do with it.
Oh, and that's interesting.
It's a really fascinating thing. At first, they're like, what?
Right.
Like, you aren't going to assign a brand or an organization. And I'm like, nope. We're going to come up with this unique content. And then you're going to tell me which brand or social cause or organization it could serve. And so then they have to analyze a brand, or they have to analyze several brands. They have to analyze their content. They have to create content. And the first couple of times, it's a little challenging, and then it's like, wow, they really can run with it. I had one student who got an internship at a really fabulous boutique agency, and she said she was sitting there and she was saying, we could do this, and we can do this, and we can do this. And she really was a nimble thinker. And I think part of it has to do with this way of working, which is an unconventional way.
Yeah. I think I have a similar approach in that in my upper level design class, I do a group project with them where everyone from the group comes up with some kind of weird found object that they have no idea what it is, or they can't put any explanation to like what its purpose is in the world. And then they have to build around that and create the brand, the packaging, the marketing pitch for it, and put that together. And they actually even do a display piece if that was, to be in a retail environment or something like that. So, I think it gives them a different way to think about solving the problem without given the parameters, perhaps.
Right.
So.
All right. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. The other thing that the way I work does is that I teach them that everything is content. So that everything they hear, if they overhear a conversation, if they see something in the world, they can use that to build unique content for audiences. And it really builds curiosity. It makes them explorers and thinkers. And that's my mantra. Everything is content, and I think content is everything right now. How can you entertain people? How can you inform people? What can you give them? That it's a participatory world and they're expecting things from brands and organizations and companies. What can you give them?
Exactly. Yeah, I tell students, people are looking for an experience. Entertain them. Yeah, definitely.
Right. It's an experience. Whether you're walking to an Apple store and that's the experience. Sorry about the sounds.
Oh, that's all right. Lets people know we're in the real world.
I live on Broadway, so it's pretty noisy. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
You're giving people experiences that, and it can be informative. It can be sensory. It can be anything, but they're expecting it.
Exactly. Right. And if it's not there, they just don't have an interest. It's hard to hold that interest. We could talk about that subject forever, but I think I want to transition this idea into that discussion of art and design, or art versus design.
Well, I come from an art and design background, so they're like, you're asking me to decide between my children. But I do think that certainly the main difference is that in art, you're creating for a much smaller audience and you're creating for the point of personal expression and communicating your ideas to the world, but in a it could be a big audience, but usually it's not the kind of way we target audiences in design. And I think art can definitely change the world and make a difference, whether it's looking at a poster of a slave ship, which was a piece of art that completely changed people's perceptions about social injustice, or whether it's a film or anything like that. But designers have to anticipate problems and solve problems. Mm-hmm. And so we are different. And I think we have an enormous role in the world. And I think part of that puts pressure on design educators, because everybody throws around design thinking and how can that be used in a company, and what is that? And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but anyway, I think depending on your university or your college, they can live harmoniously, and in some places they can't live harmoniously, and they may be teaching similar foundational ideas, and then they veer off in different directions.
Right. Do you
but
think
there is overlap, certainly?
Yeah. So, where do you find that opportunity to add that art discussion to design?
Interesting that you say that. When I teach poster design or book cover design or anything where it's a still static image, I talk a lot about entry into the composition, different compositional modes, very complex compositional modes. And I often show them fine art paintings, to explain moving in across what the picture plane is, and entry into a composition, and how can you use point of view, and where is the viewer in relation to the things seen. And I bring in different periods of art history, and they're like, wow, you should teach art appreciation. This is so cool. I wish the art history teacher did this.
Yeah.
So I utilize it in a way to demonstrate principles and theories and the plasticity of composition. And then I make sure they remember which artist and which time period I was talking about.
Yeah.
so that it broadens their interest in all of visual arts.
Yeah. So your background in art history then is really beneficial to your design teaching then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I really believe that it's important to have a good handle on art history and design history.
Yeah. And as I'm sure you know, and as many students have expressed to you as they do to many faculty, their personal love or opinions on their art history classes.
Oh, yeah.
And how much of a struggle they are. So as design educators, then where can we continue to hone those skills for our art history and finding those opportunities to find it in the classroom too? Yeah,
I try to insert it as much as I can, and I bring it in sometimes to ask philosophical questions. Like I'll show a Cubist work and talk about, how do we see? Do we see from multiple points of view? Or do we see with one point fixed in time when you shift your eye? I mean, I bring in all kinds of interesting ways of depicting the world and how artists have done that. And how can they think about that when they're creating? And then I'll relate it to contemporary designers and how they're depicting the world. They start to see things differently. You know, I even bring in TV programs. I bring in all kinds of films. I bring in everything in terms of storytelling and deconstructing. And I had them, I teach advertising also, so I have to teach storytelling. So I showed an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and they're like, wow, I'll never watch TV the same way again. Now they understood the hero's journey. You know, so I try to bring in everything that I can to give them a worldview, a broader humanities view.
Right, and put that application to design work, to graphic design, visual design.
Right, and then always bring it back, right.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I've got a poster project that I do in my intro to graphic design, and we're a liberal arts school as well. So we do have, sculptors, ceramists, psychology students, general science students that are like, I think I want to take a course in graphic design for whatever their reasons might be.
Wow, that's challenging.
Yes, it is. It was different. This is the first university I've had that diverse student background, degree background. And the first semester, obviously, it didn't go extremely well because I was doing traditional intro to graphic design. Here's the software I want you to use. And it was very difficult because probably 70% of the students hadn't touched design software ever.
Right.
Many of them were artists, right? So I had some of that background. So what I did is I started giving them the opportunity to create how they wanted. And I explained to them, it's not the tool. The tool's not the results to the end, or however that saying goes.
Right.
It's about the communication. So what is the message? What's the communication? What medium works for that communication? And I've had students use everything from, charcoal to watercolor to printmaking. I can't think of any other ones. One student just kind of smeared gouache on a page and then spattered some white paint on it for this starry night. And the results were actually remarkable because you could feel the correct communication. You could feel the intent and the results from it. And the students really enjoyed that. And I had a lot of students that are traditional graphic design students that then said, well, I don't want to use the computer this time. And I was like, wonderful. Don't use it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably changed people's lives. They probably will never see the world the same way again, thanks to you.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a grand thought, and I'll keep with that.
I believe it. No, I believe it. I believe that once you show them something like that, they can carry it forward and look at things differently.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I talk to them because the first thing they're asking in week 1 or week 2 is, when are you going to teach me the software? And I said, well, I don't want to teach you the software. And they're like, well, this is intro. And I said, I'm going to show you the software, but you have to teach yourself. You have to learn yourself. It's like picking up a hammer or a saw or a sculpting knife or whatever tool you're using. You've got to see how it works for you, because how it works for me is how it works for me. So, we go through that and they start, adapting the software to them, because I don't want to create a bunch of mini-me designers out there in the world. So I want them to have their own aesthetic and their own style and their own vibe and feel. So that's a lot of fun.
Well, that's what I would call deep learning, because you're not teaching them to strategically get by the class by they have to do X, Y, and Z. You're pushing them to learn more deeply through their own means, which is great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think they appreciate it as well. It's been really fun. And speaking of which, since we're kind of in that intro area and the students are coming in from foundations, do you have anything that you would say is untouchable in foundations? Now, I think your program now faces kind of that same challenge, right? Where do you lose 4 classes? What do you do? So what's untouchable in foundations? What might be missing even?
Well, untouchable, I guess we'll go back to art history, but I mean, you have to have 2-dimensional design, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have a drawing class. And do you have 2 drawing classes? Do you have 2 basic design courses, a 2D and a 3D? Do you have a photography course, an imaging course? Like, what do you really, what do you lose? So we did cut half the foundation. And it breaks my heart, because coming from a fine art background, and the way I entered design, and I don't know if it worked for you, but for a lot of my students, we enter through drawing. Mm-hmm. Through the love of drawing, people always say, oh, well, you should be an artist, right? You should be, right. So to cut drawing breaks my heart, but they have to leave with so much in their skill set.
Yeah.
That, how are they going to learn to create motion? How are they going to learn to create interactive design solutions. I mean,
Exactly.
it all takes time. And we don't really, none of our courses are pure tech. It's all theory plus tech. But still, they have to walk out knowing all this stuff. And, we're even thinking, how can portfolio be 1 semester? It should be 2 semesters, or it should be 6 credits, and we're constantly rethinking it. But this cutting of 11 credits, while keeping 4 art histories, because we have to keep NASAT accreditation.
Right.
It was really difficult.
Yeah, it
and
sounds...
especially if we have people transfer in, too. That's a whole other sticky wicket.
I haven't even had those discussions. Yeah. What's missing? Like, not necessarily what you've had to cut and take out, but is there something missing from foundations? And we have the foundations in place thanks to the Bauhaus School, right? And a lot of our models for a 4-year program is based off in that, experience, the materials and that kind of thing. Is it time for change in the foundations?
Well, I mean, I have a wonderful dean. He's an architect, and he comes out of the Beaux-Arts tradition, which is a kind of open studio tradition. So that sometimes isn't in design programs, but it is in architecture programs, whereas there's this ongoing open studio all week long with students and teachers as mentors, both professor/mentor. And then there's also the idea of a collaborative early experience across disciplines, whether it's graphic designers working with industrial designers and interior designers and ad designers and IT people, so there's collaboration, which they're going to encounter immediately in the workplace.
Oh, true.
And yet it doesn't happen. It usually doesn't happen early, and it may not even happen later.
Right.
So
that's actually an area that we've started discussing is that collaboration in building blocks as opposed to semester-long classes. So it'll be interesting to see where that conversation goes for us.
Right. And then we try to incorporate 2 conference experiences for them, one a semester, where we have charrettes, we have competitions among the students, and those are collaborative. But it is very hard to get everything in a world where students are going to be interacting globally with people. Mm-hmm. How do you work on interdisciplinary teams, on intercultural teams? That's a whole other thing to think about. Mm-hmm. There's just so much.
Yeah, I agree. And we only have so much time.
Right.
Yeah, and like what you're up against, the 120 credits is a challenge. So as far as the curriculum goes, then what do you think's most important curriculum-wise 1 year out? Is there somewhere that we should be heading, an area we should be considering in the near future? So what's the immediate importance for graphic design or design or even art education?
I mean, 1 year from now, where will design education be? I do think we have to constantly think about, as you had said earlier, clarity of communication, which we always have to think about. But I think we have to really think about how do we bridge the digital realm and the physical realm for students? How do we create experiences in the physical world that they create and understand? We have to teach them to be nimble thinkers, able to adapt their expertise like on a dime. So being adaptive. And to me, that's so critical, that they're synthetic thinkers, dissociative thinkers, just keeping their thinking skills really sharp.
Have you ever, and I wonder how many people actually have done this, have you ever changed a specification on a project intentionally, like midway through or something like that, to be like, oh, by the way, faux client just called and now they need this, so we have to adapt?
No, but now I will. Thank you.
I've pondered it, but I just feel so guilty, and I feel like, oh boy, talk about setting up my own demise, but I've always wanted to, but I'm just afraid that they'll all just drop everything they have and just walk out of the classroom and be like, nope.
No, I think they'll surprise you.
Yeah. I might try it this semester. I'll get back to you then. What about 5 years?
Well, I think it's still the same. I think we have to teach them to problem find, to use their studio practice to anticipate problems. I think so much emphasis is on problem solving and not enough on anticipating what's going to happen and understanding systems and understanding the broader context of where design lives in the economy. So if we teach them to be strategic thinkers, that's not enough. They have to be synthetic thinkers, bisociative thinkers, and adaptive. I think I said the same thing for the one year. But
yeah, but no, I think you did add some context to that, for sure. And
because software is going to change.
Oh goodness,
So they have to, as you said, they have to learn that on their own. That's going to be ongoing, rapid changes. But we are really obliged to teach them to be critical, creative, and imaginative thinkers. And there is a difference between being a creative thinker and an imaginative thinker. But we often forget about critical thinking.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. They need to have, a balance of the two. Be imaginative, but also be critical.
Right.
That you can meet, you can meet your imagination kind of thing.
With that, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, definitely. After you.
I think the imagination has to do with world building and storytelling and world building and understanding that you use your imagination to make something out of nothing. Whereas creativity, you can twist something and you've got a slightly new thing. So I really do teach them the difference between being creative and being imaginative and how you use world building skills in animation and in storytelling and in web and in advertising and in editorial and.
Yeah. We both know change in academia moves slow. But do you think there's anything that you can add to 10 years from now?
Well, I do think probably intercultural collaboration will be critical. It's already starting to be important in a global world, a 24/7 world where we have clients all over. And I think as people work and study in different countries and we work together, we will have to learn how to deal with each other's cultures respectively and productively.
Right. Do you think, I'm noticing a lot of the students that are coming in to their 4-year studies as freshmen are really missing an art or design introduction in high school. Have you kind of noticed a similar pattern?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
It varies. So we get about 50% of our students are transfers. So they're coming from an art or design program. So that's cool. But the high school students may or may not have had an introduction. And so their taste may not be where I think it should be. And they're not exposed and they haven't gone to enough museums so I think it is critical. There is a secondary design group. Joe Schwartz, I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
Works with. And so I think it's something that secondary education really has to think about. And then we have to fill in gaps if the secondary schools haven't done their job. And students also come in from families where visual culture isn't big, and so there's no exposure, or not even in films. They haven't seen independent films. They've only seen blockbuster films, it's a really interesting for a lot of students. They're not coming in with that the way you or I might have come in with that.
Yeah, I did notice the change moving from New York to Purdue in Indiana. It changed a little bit, but now that I moved here to Central Arkansas, and we are a regional 4-year liberal arts BA, BFA program, it's changed even greater. So the amount of students who have had art in high school is pretty limited, and practically none, maybe 10%, have had any introduction to design. So it's really interesting, and it is a situation that we have to deal with. And I just recently shared some correspondence with Joe Schwartz and from Design-ED, Design. And he's got a great nonprofit organization that he's working with there. And in our conversation, we're hopefully going to be able to collaborate and
wonderful.
Yeah, and do some work together. He's been doing a lot of work since 2012, if I'm correct, with his organization. So I think that's fantastic, and I'm hopeful that maybe I can grow that relationship in this area as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking with Joe further. We're getting together shortly. We're still working out those details, but that'd be fantastic. And
one
I'm
of the
hoping.
ways I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just also hoping he'll be a guest on the podcast. So Joe, if you're
wonderful.
listening,
He's a very interesting guy.
Awesome.
The other thing, the way we address this is that we have a freshman course called Intro to Design and Culture that deals with all the design disciplines.
Oh, okay.
And architecture.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I just spoke with Brian Flynn and David Moyer from the Pennsylvania College. Pennsylvania. Oh boy, they're going to hate me now because all of a sudden I forgot the name of their university. Pennsylvania College of Technology. Yeah, and they have a design program there. And they've done something very similar in their freshman year, added a literacy class for art and design in their graphic design program. So I think that's fantastic as well. So if anyone doesn't know that you have been the author of Graphic Design Solutions, now they need to know.
Thank you.
I think that is, in my opinion, others may have different opinions, but in my opinion, that is the most thorough book for introduction to graphic design. And I love its progress as well. The way it kind of, okay, here's an intro, and it kind of takes you all the way through in a very sensible pattern. And I continue to use that, and I think it's a fabulous book. Thank
you so much.
Oh, you're
I really
more than
appreciate that.
You're more than welcome. It's on the 6th edition, or are you on 7?
Yes, I'm in the 6th edition now, and it's the first, besides the print book, it's the first interactive design book. There is a proprietary platform. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of that.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I've tried over my just over a decade worth of teaching, several different texts for that introductory class, and when I came upon it, I think it was the 4th edition. So I apologize, I'm not an early adopter, but in that discovery, I was like, oh my gosh, finally, it's all here. And it just kind of matched exactly how I wanted to, and how my classes were set up. So it was a great companion for me.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that.
Thank you. And people don't realize there's tons of materials online that go with it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the instructor workbook that comes with it is fabulous as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's remarkable. And what I'm segueing into is advice. So I got to speak with you at New Paltz during the conference there. What was the name of that conference again?
Design Incubation.
Design Incubation, that's right. And if anyone hasn't heard about Design Incubation, look into that.
Please.
It's a fabulous conference. And I like the scale of them. They're not like these grand, 500, 600, 1,000 people. They're smaller in scale for now. Maybe they'll grow, but
and we're very friendly.
Yes, very much so. And the intimacy of the discussions is fantastic. I learned a lot from being out to those. So anyhow, Robin, advice. I would love for you to give some advice for design educators as they're, getting students ready for this journey. Kind of related to what we've been speaking to, about that state of design education.
So getting students ready or getting themselves ready? Which one
Let's do both. Let's do both. So as a design educator, what advice do you have for us?
For educators, I would say that you need to obviously stay abreast of everything that's happening. I really urge people to go online and read as much as they can. Go to conferences, whether it's Design Incubation. We're free, by the way, which is, that's really helpful for design educators to attend a free conference. You just have to get yourself there, but there's no fee to attend. Try to give a paper. We're very friendly. You can always ask somebody to mentor you and look at your abstract before you submit it. And you can submit an abstract about pedagogy or about a project or about your research, anything. And tenure and retention and tenure are very important. And you got to think about how you present yourself at the university, what they're looking for, what their guidelines are. If you feel that people really aren't familiar with design, then you have to explain it in your retention and tenure folders. You have to take it upon yourself to explain what it is that you do and what the value is to the world. So try to get published, try to give conference papers, network. You and I met through the conference, and I've met so many wonderful people through Design Incubation and the AIGA and the One Club. It's really important to get out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I thought I was cutting.
No, and even with Design Incubation, if you can't travel, depending on where we're having the particular colloquium, we could Skype you in.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
so if you wanted to present via Skype, it depends which university is hosting, whether they can do that. So
Correct,
when we did it at my university, we were able to Skype people in.
See, now that I know that, I'm going to try to participate more.
Yeah, because it's less of a footprint in the world, and of course you don't get to hang out with people and have coffee, but
true, right.
Better than not doing it.
How about advice for them for preparing students? Is there, we were talking about all this change that's happening in design education. The students are changing. Advice from that route?
Well, I think we have to make sure students have a new kind of mindset that's an anticipatory mindset, not where they're waiting for somebody to hand them a problem, but where they're looking for things that they can solve or anticipating change in the world. I think we have to cultivate their creative thinking, their critical thinking, their imagination. I think we have to teach them to be able to use bisociative thinking, which is bring ideas that might be unrelated and put them together to create a new whole, a special kind of synthetic thinking. I think we have to teach them to adapt their expertise with additional knowledge, always be T-shaped thinkers. I'm a major advocate of T-shaped thinking, which means that we have the vertical bar of the T is our own expertise in design, but that crossbar extends to other areas. So read about science, read about philosophy, read the front page of the New York Times. Really be a person of the world. The example I use is not in our field, but somebody like Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, when he was going on vacation, rather than picking up a book about music or theater, he picked up a biography of Alexander Hamilton. Because he was curious about the world outside of his own discipline, the result was this brilliant work of art.
I can't agree with you more. My minors have included sociology, psychology, communications, in business. I did some marketing backgrounds as well. And yes, I was so glad that I did those things and didn't just stick with my little arts channel. So I completely agree. That's great advice. So that does give a little bit of advice to students. I do have a number of students and recent graduates that listen to the podcast as well. Any advice for them as they move on? I know a few of them keep in contact with me, and they're like, "Hey, I've got this job, and I've been working here for a while. Things are going great, but I just got this new offer from this other place. What do I do?"
Yeah, it's really hard for them. And the first thing I tell them all is to try to find a mentor as soon as they get into a job. They had us in college, but they do need somebody there, somebody who's going to guide them, somebody that they trust, somebody who has and there may even be a mentoring program at the studio or company or agency where they're working. The other thing is, I always say, leave if you're not learning. Don't follow the money, follow how you're going to learn and how you're going to grow. And I get upset when I see very talented kids take a job because the money offer is really good, but I know that they're going to be bored. Mm-hmm. I always say, if your folks will let you sleep in the house and give you pasta every night, do that so that you can take a job where you're going to learn more.
Yeah.
So learning on the job is very important. You don't want to not learn and just stay because of the salary if you can.
Right.
But finding a mentor is really important. And the mentor could be outside of the company.
Sure.
It could be somebody else beyond your professors, somebody in the industry. A lot of people are open to mentoring.
Yeah, definitely. And I know sometimes students are hesitant to ask, and they've asked me, do you think I should ask that person? And it's like, sure. They can
Absolutely.
either say no or yes. So
right.
And it's not going to hurt their feelings for you to ask them. So
no, in fact, they probably feel very good about being
exactly.
asked. And the other thing is, if your state has a chapter of the AIGA, I would say networking is critical. Go to the lectures, go to the events, find out what's happening in your city and your state, and even if you have to, travel a little bit to get there, it's important to network.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough as well, to network. I just was in a conversation yesterday with someone here locally that is running a design agency. Mostly their area is video work. I'm also a practicing designer as well, so I wanted to meet with them and talk with them and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do. It's great to be in the area. It's nice to meet some of the fellow creatives and designers that are in town. And he was kind of blown away and kind of stepped aside by that, meaning he's like, typically everybody is like, oh, we can't talk to them. They're in the same industry and same field and they're our competitors. Let's not have a conversation. As a matter of fact, you are now, no longer on the alliance side. And but yeah, we had a good conversation on the importance of reaching out, the importance of communicating, the importance of working with others and networking. So yeah, I fully agree. You're going to be more successful all the way around, I think, if you're out there working with other people, networking and keeping that community. And design community is very small. There's as
right.
big as the world we live in, it's a very small community for sure. Everyone seems to know, or through a first, second, or third connection, know the other person. So,
That's so true.
Definitely.
Right, and then related to that, just for your students, is don't burn bridges.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Because we are all in this small community, so be nice, be tolerant, and be nice.
Exactly. So what are you working on? Before I let you go, what are you working on? What's coming up for you? Anything that you want to tell us about?
I'm working on a couple of things. I'm working on, right now I'm getting ready to send out a proposal for a new book on creative thinking for more of a general audience. I'm trying to hit a wider range. And then I have another proposal in the works of a book on typography that I developed with Rich Tu, from Vice President of Design at MTV, hitting a more diverse group of designers, showing different diversity and inclusion examples that really span the world. So working on both of those.
That's so needed today, yeah.
And then I don't know if you know, I took a little side hustle of writing fiction, so I'm doing that too. Yeah, so I have had, I think, 4 stories published.
Oh, congratulations! That's neat.
Thank you. So that's my side lunchtime hustle.
Okay, where can we find those publications?
So far, Crack the Spine, the editor at Crack the Spine has liked my work, so they've published, I think, 4 of my stories.
Oh, that's exciting!
And
yeah,
more to come.
All right, we'll be watching for that. When will the when will the collaborative book on the diversity and inclusion and the global look at design
that's
coming out?
Still finding a home, so not yet.
Yeah, that discussion on our history of design and who's done what. We've learned. I'm imagining you have from the Philip Meggs brick on graphic design history, and it's time, and that's always going to be the go-to book, perhaps. But it's time that becomes more diversified.
Right. Right. That's
goes
what we
beyond
were thinking.
The European region.
Right. Yeah. That's what we were thinking. So any publishers are out there, we've got that proposal.
That's right. Give Robin a call.
Yeah.
Find her on social media. Find her. She's out there, right? You can be found.
I'm definitely out there. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. They can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah. I was going to say, where can the listeners and viewers and publishers, where can they find you?
I love you, Pete. Thank you. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can email me at rlanda@kean.edu. They can find me on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm all over the place. I have my own website. And please visit Design Incubation to all the faculty. I think we're a wonderfully, as you said, friendly national design organization.
Yes, I agree. Such friendly. Everyone on the board that, I don't know if it's changed much, but it's been 2 years since I was at the Design Incubation. But my goodness, such a friendly, helpful, respectful group of colleagues. Yeah, I can't say enough.
Thank you. That's why I joined the governance, because I just thought they were just wonderful people.
I agree.
Dan Wong is one of the co-founders, and he's there, and Aris Sharon and Liz DeLuna, and we're inviting other people in as well.
Awesome. I'm gonna look into it. I remember speaking to someone before about the growth of Design Incubation, and I'm so curious on that. It'd be interesting to see, because like Creative Mornings or like Type Thursday, they've become global, national, international, if you will, and maybe there's an opportunity for Design Incubation to grow to that someday.
I hope so, yeah. Our next session that I'm running is at Quinnipiac College in October, and besides the colloquium, on Sunday, there's going to be a day of writing. So people, I don't know how many spots we have left, but I'll be there to help people figure out what they want to write about, and it should be a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I hope everyone looks into that, and I hope some people, meet you, reach out to you. I know that you're very open to talk with folks and everything, and so, which is kind of where this whole podcast kind of comes from. It comes from this idea of sharing our knowledge and working with each other and just creating success in design education. So I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Anything else you want to leave us with before we say goodbye to our listeners?
You can find out about my books at robinlandabooks.com, and I am absolutely happy to talk to anybody and advise anybody. That's what we do. Design Incubation, we're really there to help faculty.
Excellent. I appreciate you spending the time with me today and having a conversation.
My pleasure, Pete. Thank you.
You're welcome. And until we meet again and chat again, Robin, stay well.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. The Designed Podcast website is located at thedesignpodcast.com. There you can find notes on the episode, links to our guests, links to resources, and more regarding the many things discussed during each show. If you find the Design Podcast interesting and informative, please subscribe on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast service. You can also follow the Design Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our video version of the podcast on YouTube. Please join us for the next episode of the Design Podcast, and let's continue to create success in design education.